Welcome to Westpac. This is Kathy speaking. Can I start with your 8-digit customer number or account number, please?
I don't have the information in front of me, love. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Can I have your surname then?
Yeah, Harbour, same as Sydney Harbour.
And your Christian name?
Cameron, Cameron.
Yep.
Middle name, John. I've got a 3-digit access code. Do you want that?
Yeah, I'll need that in a minute.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, and your 3-digit access code? And your address? Thank you. Okay, this call may be monitored or recorded for training quality assurance purposes.
Likewise.
Just bear with me. I'll just have a look. It's your personal loan, obviously.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah, okay. We'll just have a look. Oh, yes. So it's $1,773.52 in arrears, and there's another $436.63 due on the 22nd of August. Okay. All right. So what's your situation at the moment then? What's happening at the moment?
Okay.
That you haven't been able to make payments?
No, it's not that I haven't been able to. I have sent an FCA letter, a faux creditor action, to Blacktown branch manager here in New South Wales, Sydney area. He's then apparently forwarded it to the legal team, and the legal team has not responded. It was actually sent to Service Experience in Sydney City, and those people were asked to respond. They did not answer or respond to any of the questions regarded in the FCA, and they refused to respond to that correspondence of that nature any further. So then I've sent several other letters to the collections team as well. Again, all avoidance on Westpac's behalf regarding the letters that we have sent. Now, I need to speak to someone high up in your section. Apart from just you, I need to speak to either someone that's your superior or the top end manager in your department, because I have my power of attorney on the line, waiting to speak to you guys.
Okay.
Now you have a copy. You have a copy of the power of attorney agreement.
Yeah, it does say here that there's a power of attorney. Yeah. I'm just trying to say, you're saying this debt, you don't owe this debt?
No.
I'm the power of attorney, Kathy, Mike Montagne in the United States here. No, we're contesting the legitimacy and thus the contractual enforceability of an obfuscation of Cameron's promissory obligation into a falsified debt to the banking system, which has given up no commensurable consideration in purportedly creating money. Now, the questions that Cameron's mentioned relate to whether or not the banking system gave up commensurable consideration in the creation of money, and how debt possibly precipitates to the banking system legitimately without giving up commensurable consideration, if that is the case, as we, of course, all know is the case. So we're contesting what is a criminal obfuscation of our currency to which there is no knowledgeable public assent. Now, the bank's reasons for not answering profoundly exhibit bad faith. The questions are submitted in good faith, and obviously, if the banking system could show how debt precipitates to the banking system without even giving up commensurable consideration in its ostensible creation of money, you could answer the questions. But as we all know, there is no answer to the question in any development of law or other material in any related to any land. So it's obvious why the bank is operating an evasion, but The FCA asks these questions in good faith. You are exhibiting bad faith by not answering them. So we want to talk to a legal person qualified to answer the questions or to understand the ramifications of their inability to answer the questions, which thus demonstrates unequivocally and absolutely an inability to explain in legitimate legal terms how debt precipitates to a banking system which gives up no commensurable consideration in the creation of money. Now, there are many further questions which are raised, but it happens that this obfuscation of our currency is inherently terminal because it imposes upon us an implicit obligation to maintain a vital circulation by a perpetual escalation of faux borrowing, in which principal is paid from our possession and is required to be borrowed back into our possession, thus making it mathematically impossible to pay down any prior sum of faux debt to the banking system, whereas interest, therefore, is paid out of circulation and is borrowed back into our possession as further debt, with a sum of faux debt perpetually increasing by inherently ever greater sums of periodic interest on an ever greater sum of faux debt until even at an inherently escalating rate, we suffer terminal artificial monetary failure under your obfuscation of the currency, which is why we're contesting the obfuscation of our currency, which is of Cameron's promissory obligation. So until your legal team has answered the questions, you are operating in bad faith. And all acts and attempts to evade answering the questions, presuming to inform us that debt precipitates without being able to demonstrate how, is in further bad faith.
I'm really confused at what you're saying. I mean, obviously the
it's really funny, Kathy.
Cameron has taken out a loan, which involves interest, which involves having to pay it back. He has a contract.
You presented it as a loan, which means that the money was ostensibly lent from legitimate possession, which cannot be established without giving up commensurable consideration for the money. A debt does precipitate from the acts, and we understand that. We don't contest the debt. We assert, on the contrary, and are prepared to prove in a court of law that the debt does not precipitate to the banking system, that it instead translates to an obligation to redeem the issued money in a like volume of Mr. Harbour's own production. So we're not contesting the debt. You are saying, again, falsely. Can you explain how debt precipitates to a banking system which doesn't even give up commensurable consideration in the creation of money?
No, I can't.
No. Well, then you can't.
We don't have to, though. We don't have to.
You don't have to. You can operate in a contract in bad faith then. You can pretend to lend from legitimate possession when you haven't at all, you're saying. You don't have to.
No, the bank.
This discussion, by the way,
excuse me. The bank. Yeah, the bank has lent money to the customer. Okay, that's what it amounts to, and he has to pay that money back with interest and charges if he doesn't make those minimal payments.
Explain to us. How we've asked the question, you haven't answered it. You've just said you've lent us money again, which we understand the bank pretends to do. It hasn't lent its money, but it is laundering the principal into its unwarranted and illegitimate possession because it hasn't given up commensurable consideration in the creation of money. Can you imagine how the banking system could possibly give up commensurable consideration in the creation of money?
No, I really quite don't understand what you're trying to get at, but all I know that the customer has been with our banking system. He has a contract. He has a contract with the bank. The bank has lent him the money, and he's taken the money.
You have falsified your role in the contract. You're pretending to lend money from your legitimate possession. And you're pretending the principal is your legitimate possession, which ostensibly justifies interest. Neither of which are true, unless you gave up commensurable consideration for the money. Because we only obtain money and establish legitimate title to money in any economy in the world by giving up commensurable consideration. If I sell my house to you for £100,000, then I've given up commensurable consideration for £100,000, and that £100,000 is representation of my entitlement.
Yeah. But the bank has this money, and they lend it out.
Oh, no. They have to create money. All money did not always exist. And until we trace money to its root, you can't say that the bank has money. It's taken money, but is it taking it legitimately is the question here. You're pretending to lend money from legitimate possession, which has to exist, to lend.
The bank works within the law, and the money it lends out is legitimate.
In every country of the world, the banking system funds every party and every ascending candidate, and it's subverted our law. If the bank worked within the law, that is, within veritable representation of the people, in any country of the world, there would be knowledgeable public assent of how the banking system ostensibly lends money into existence or ever afterward. And in no country of the world, in the history of no country of the world, can you find legitimate development of law. Instead, on the contrary, the advocates of banking, who established banking in every country, did so by utter lies. You can't find a person in any country of the world who can explain how money can, according to all the other principles that we uphold in the law, be lent into existence.
Excuse me, we're going around and round in
I've
circles.
Repeated myself, but you have gone around in circles. You are reasserting that the contract is legitimate without demonstrating how it's legitimate or how it could possibly be legitimate, without answering the questions which have been raised in good faith. If you refuse to answer them, you only continue to operate in bad faith, because you haven't uttered a word how anyone in the world could understand how money could be lent into existence or ever afterward from legitimate possession by a banking system which never gives up commensurable consideration, either in the creation of money or ever afterward. So if you're not qualified to answer the question, you're neither qualified to say that the contract is legitimate.
Yes, it is a legitimate contract.
You're just saying it's legitimate.
Look, I'm just going around and...
I would bet you that the bank didn't even sign that contract.
Sorry.
And I would bet you that there's a clause in that contract that says it's not, that it cannot, the bank cannot be prosecuted for fraud, and fraud can't nullify the contract.
It's not fraud. The bank has lent money legally.
Are you saying there is no such clause in that contract?
Look, we're just going around in circles.
Yes,
I'm going to end the...
No, we're not going around in a circle. That's a new question.
I'm just going to end the call. Thank you.
No, don't end the call. No.
Well, what do you wanted me to do?
Then you cannot negotiate in good faith. I've asked you a question which requires a yes or no answer.
What I require you to do is get your superior on the line. Okay.
All right, then I'll find someone. Hang on. Bye.
Okay.
I'll just get him in a minute.
Thank you. She's a dope.
As are the many.
Yep. She's got all flustered.
Well, you know, if she was losing her house, she might be compelled to re-examine the things which she's just accepted at face value, regardless how blatant the lie. You know, she's never done this thinking. She is incredibly simple-minded and has no demonstrable capacity to even converse on the topic in any legitimate way. She's just going to regurgitate the party line here.
Yep. Sounds like she took her headphones off and stormed away from her office desk. I need help. I need help. I'm an old lady.
I don't think
idea
she's
what...
smart enough to know that she needs help. There are only two colors, black and white. And we've chosen black.
Come on, lady. I haven't got all day.
The big boss.
That's why I
though he does nothing productive is.
That's why I suggested to her, mate. Get her superior on the line, because I'm not going to talk this stupid.
You were right in that, but she wanted to engage us as if she could take care of the problem.
Yeah, right.
As a clerk.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Is this Michael?
Mike Montagne
this is
here.
Yeah.
And
Michael?
with Cameron John Harbour.
Yes. Hello. My name's Joe. I'm a team leader here. How can I help you?
Joe, what's your last name?
We don't give out our last names.
Do you have an employee
How can I help
number?
you today?
Do you have it?
I think just have you got a pen? MJOB.
MJOB. Okay.
Yeah. How can I help you today?
We are calling because the bank has refused repeatedly to hold a discussion with Cameron and myself. I have power of attorney in Cameron's purported debt to the bank. And they have been informed by way of what we call an FCA, faux creditor action, of two pivotal questions upon which your obfuscation of Cameron's promissory obligation into a falsified debt to the banking system hinges to what is otherwise a falsified debt to the banking system. The two questions, there are other questions, but the two principal questions are whether the banking system gives up commensurable consideration in the creation of money, which question, of course, is rhetorical. And furthermore, then, if it does not, how does debt legitimately precipitate to the banking system without giving up commensurable consideration in the creation of money or ever afterward? In other words, it's laundering the principal into its otherwise unwarranted possession. The second question is how giving other consequences, which we've carefully articulated, which consequences amount to a fact that this obfuscation is terminal, in pretending that the banking system has legitimate possession of or title to the principal upon creation or ever afterward without giving up commensurable consideration, or providing to redeem money, which it calls a note, in a like volume of its own possession or production. The banking system nonetheless pretends that the principal is at stake and imposes interest upon us, which is inherently terminal because it imposes upon us an implicit obligation to maintain a vital circulation by a perpetual escalation of borrowing, in which we pay principal from our general possession, or what we call the circulation, but which is our possession of that circulation, back to the banking system, forcing us to borrow that back as new debt equal to the old, making it mathematically impossible to pay down any prior sum of debt, whereas then the interest that we pay from our possession to yours is borrowed back as further debt, with a sum of faux debt to the banking system then inherently increasing by ever greater sums of periodic interest on an ever greater sum of faux debt until we inevitably suffer a terminal sum of falsified debt, which exceeds our remaining capacity to service it, and in so doing destroys creditworthiness to borrow further, as nonetheless remains indispensable to maintaining a vital circulation. This, of course, is the cause of the present global monetary failure, which is terminal. There is no way to pay down the sum of debt. It's mathematically impossible to pay down the sum of debt under the circumstances imposed upon us. The second question that we ask is how, given that is an observable fact, there is any knowledgeable public assent of this obfuscation, in other words, of the question of how banking ostensibly creates money as a debt to itself without giving up commensurable consideration in the process. And furthermore, then that knowledgeable public assent requires that we are fully comprehensive of the fact that the obfuscation is terminal. Moreover, then, if you assert that the bank can create money without giving up commensurable consideration, launder it then into its unwarranted possession, and provide no means whatsoever to redeem money in a like volume of your legitimate possession, you're aware, of course, what substantive law is, if you're qualified to answer any questions on this matter. Well, substantive law, under substantive law, we all have equal rights. You cannot deny Cameron, then, an equal right to commit the promissory fraud of the banking system, which we don't claim a right to commit, of course. But you cannot deny, then, that if you're creating irredeemable promissory obligations to yourselves, then that he can do so as if that would resolve the very debt that you claim to the banking system. So we have asked two questions in good faith to the bank, and the bank has refused to answer the question and has reasserted that the contract is not fraudulent over and over and over again, person after person after person, none of whom have answered the questions upon which the legitimacy of the debt to the bank hinges, unless you can show otherwise. So either commensurable consideration is irrelevant, though it pertains and applies and prevails in all of our other affairs, okay, which is, of course, a preposterous proposition then, or then you must give up commensurable consideration, or you are not lending money into existence because you, in fact, are giving no legitimate legal substance to money whatsoever because you have no consideration at stake. All right? So that's the question that we're asking. And the reason that we're asking it is not to evade debt. We acknowledge that a debt precipitates from Cameron's promissory obligation. But there's a legal precedent that extends across all known history, and that is that, for example, Benjamin Franklin was commissioned to issue the colonial currency of Pennsylvania and the later Continental during the American Revolution. Why weren't our debts to Benjamin Franklin? Ultimately, the reasons that our debts were not to Benjamin Franklin is that he gave up no commensurable consideration, and he wouldn't have dreamed of claiming that the money issued was a debt to him. But that's what banking does everywhere in the world. Now, if you claim you can answer that question, or that you have a legitimate answer that will stand in a court of law, you're the first bank ever to do so. I have banks around the world walking on as much as $10 million of debt for that question that they can't answer. Now, if you're going to tell me that you don't need to create commensurable consideration, you haven't established how your contract was legitimate. Because all of us acquire money as representation of entitlement by giving up commensurable consideration. I acquire money, which is promissory notes. If I sell you a £100,000 house, I acquire the £100,000 for giving up commensurable consideration. So that £100,000 legitimately represents my entitlement. You are no more the banking system. You are a peripheral bank of a central banking system. But you are no more than publishing further representations of the all the promissory obligations of the people. So we're asking you what your answer is to our two questions. Everyone at your bank has refused to answer, and in fact, the woman we just spoke to asserted that you just have the power to do this, that she didn't have to explain how that worked, that you don't even have to know how that could be a legitimate process, in other words, and therefore you just say that the contract is legitimate, which you pretended from the very beginning, you see, and we understand that. But that doesn't demonstrate good faith. In fact, it's proof of further bad faith. Until you can prove to us, as should stand in a legitimate court of law, how debt can precipitate to a banking system which does not even give up commensurable consideration in the creation of money, in its ostensible creation of money, in which creation it is no more than the publisher that Benjamin Franklin was of the colonial currency of Pennsylvania and the later Continental, then you have no legitimate contract. Furthermore, the artificial circumstances that your obfuscation of our currency imposes upon us, the fact that they precipitate in an implicit obligation to maintain a vital circulation by perpetual escalation of borrowing, in which we ultimately suffer a terminal sum of falsified debt which we can no longer afford to service, is as much as that impairs our opportunity even to fulfill the contract. You are well aware, if you are a legal person, that grounds alone, furthermore, on its own, makes your contract unenforceable. So how would you also say that your contract is enforceable without proving how, under the practical implementation of your obfuscation, which forces us to borrow, that it is possible to maintain a vital circulation without ultimately suffering a terminal sum of falsified debt? So these are the questions we've asked you, and we understand that we will not get a legitimate answer. You hope to punish and intimidate Mr. Harbour however you may, pretending that you're operating under the color of law, when the law and the development of law, which owes representation to the people, has never been developed either with knowledgeable public assent or comprehensive and uncontradictory or faithful performance or sustentation of the principles which apply to all other affairs, in which debt never precipitates without giving up commensurable consideration. So we want answers to those questions. And I suggest that unless you are a fool, that you don't even tempt yourself to answer those questions until you put your recording of this discussion to the legal team of your bank so that they answer all of those questions and the further ones, which are just around the corner from each of them. which are raised in the FCA that you have had in your possession, which, if I might remind you, where it is signed by Mr. Harbour, reminds you that if you claim this right to issue irredeemable promissory obligations and yet call them notes of your own possession, more or less, then you ought, unless you deny our right to substantive rights, you ought to recognize that Mr. Cameron has a like and equal right, in which case his signature of that FCA has not repaid, because that's a legal impossibility, but resolved the debt which you have only falsified. Now, what we understand is that his debt translates instead to an obligation to redeem the issued money in a like volume of his own production. Now, there are many facts that surround all this, and that which imply that furthermore there's a contractual obligation that he comply with an obligatory schedule of payment which retires the principal at the rate of consumption of the related property. Now, you can find all kinds of information of mine online corroborating that fact, but until you answer the more fundamental questions, you don't even have a legitimate role or stake in the matter at hand. So I suggest that you go to your legal team, you take this conversation, this recording of this conversation, because I'm sure it's above your head, because nowhere, I've studied this matter for 50 years, nowhere in the world has anyone legitimately explained how money can be lent into existence.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll forward the details onto our legal department. You've already sent a letter in, I understand. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd appreciate that very much. This would be a sane way to proceed.
So as far as the contract of this personal loan goes, I mean, at the time that Cameron took the contract out, we were lending money in good faith, and he was borrowing money in good faith, and so we will continue. Can I? I just gave you the good grace to continue without interrupting you. So can you do the same for me?
I will, but
so
just
thank you.
good faith. We've just contested
so what we will.
Faith.
So what we'll do, and as I said, I'll send the details to our legal department. So in the meantime, if you have these concerns that you want to raise, our normal collections activity continues, because as far as we understand, this contract is a legitimate contract. So what will happen is the calls will continue if we continue to have Cameron's details in our system. If he doesn't want the calls, we can take the number out and he won't get the calls. However, the account will still continue to go overdue, and at some stage will probably be outsourced or sold to a debt collection company with a possible credit listing.
I think it would be
so that will happen.
I think it would be
that will happen
to discontinue the calls, except as answer these questions, which raise bad faith, as I've carefully explained to you. Moreover,
so you were saying,
as far as your regular collection.
So I'm trying to understand what you're saying here. So are you saying that you want us to remove the numbers so Cameron doesn't receive calls?
Well, he doesn't receive harassment calls. And until you answer these questions, why harass the man? He's asked questions in good faith, raising bad faith.
As I said, I will send them on to the relevant department who can respond. But these calls for collections will continue if I continue with leaving these numbers on the system. So do you want the numbers removed or left on there?
That's up to you, Cameron.
I don't want you guys to call me and harass me for any purported monies that I purport to owe the banking system, you, Westpac, okay? So until...
So if we take the number off the system, you won't receive any calls at all from us.
Well, that's good. That's what I like. Well,
so you want the numbers removed?
Please. I just want you to follow my power of attorney's direction. And
so what I'll do is I will forward the details onto our legal department, and they can act as they see appropriate. But as I said, as far as the contract goes, as a separate issue, the bank considers this to be a legitimate contract, and it will continue along the normal process of our collections activity.
You said the bank considers. Now, obviously, you, to say that in good faith, have to consider it so too.
So what I'll do is, as I said, I'll forward these details onto our legal department and they can respond as they see fit, okay? And I'll have somebody remove the numbers from the system so you don't continue to receive the calls.
To be clear,
all right,
until they do respond, as resolves how debt can legitimately precipitate to a banking system which gives up no commensurable consideration in its ostensible creation of money or purported lending ever afterward. Until they do, answer, as will stand in the highest courts of every land. Until they do, you are to understand, as I explained to you, and I feel that I need to emphasize because you seem to just want to go on the same blank, unqualified path of the banking system. You need to understand that Mr. Cameron has, if you claim a right to issue an irredeemable promise to pay as a purported debt, then you cannot deny him the like right, and therefore the matter is resolved by his signature, which is something that we don't claim is legitimate. But if your claims to a legitimate contract are to stand, then unless he can be denied the like right, the matter is concluded. The falsified debt is resolved. You're to understand that. That's our legal argument. That's what we will present in a court of law, should this proceed to a court of law.
All right. Well, as I'm sure you can appreciate that I'm not a legal representative of the bank, so I'll have that forwarded on to our legal representatives. And in the meantime, the normal collections activity will continue.
No, you're not understanding. You take no further action against me with any other departments or entities through Westpac Bank until we get a reply from the legal team.
Yeah, that doesn't. It doesn't. No, I'm sorry, it doesn't happen that way. So we continue with our normal collections activity. If after the fact you decide that you want to take up
what
some
do you
legal
mean by normal
action,
activity?
That means that you'll continue to receive the letters that we need to send out. We won't call you, and if the account does get outsourced or sold to a debt collection company, as per our normal procedure, then there may be a credit listing.
You can't do that until in front of a judge.
As a separate issue, I'll send the details that we've discussed today off to our legal department, and then they can respond as they see appropriate.
What you were effectively telling us is that you intend to prosecute your falsifications of this debt, though they would be resolved by the like right of Mr. Harbour, if what you claim is a right to issue debt is sustained. That you intend to prosecute the falsification. Therefore, you yourself, Joe, are participating in not only a fraud, but a crime of the most monumental magnitude, as imposes terminal monetary failure on every country of the world. Yes or no?
As I've said, I'll forward it on to the people that have the qualifications to be able to respond, okay? So thank you for your time today.
All right, Joe,
I appreciate
thank you
that.
for your time.
Okay.
We'll see you in
Thank
court.
you. Bye-bye.